Lenny Tavern, Henninger's enforcer, was a different breed. Where Henninger was the calculating mind, Tavern was the brutal hand, a man built like a brick wall, with eyes that carried the cold glint of a seasoned killer. Tavern was the syndicate's answer to problems that couldn't be solved with threats or bribes. He understood the unspoken language of violence, the finality of a well-placed bullet or a crushing blow. When whispers of David's increasingly aggressive investigation reached him, a grim satisfaction settled in his chest. This was his domain. Decisive action. Clean resolutions. The syndicate had tolerated the occasional rogue cop before, the minor inconveniences of investigations that fizzled out under pressure or intimidation. But David was different. He was relentless, and worse, he was driven by something deeper than duty. Tavern sensed it, a primal fury simmering beneath the detective's controlled exterior. It made David dangerous, but in Tavern's twisted logic, it also made him predictable. A man consumed by vengeance could be manipulated or eliminated. The syndicate's intelligence network usually focused on shipping schedules. Customs patrols and rival gangs had begun to notice the unusual police activity. Informants embedded in the community, and even along the fringes of the police department, fed them snippets of information. They knew about David's obsession with his wife's murder, the singular focus that had consumed him. They knew about his partnership with Dargo, the gruff but loyal officer who seemed to steady David's increasingly erratic behavior. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was the true source of David's transformation. They saw a man driven by grief, not a man tethered to a spirit that had slipped out of the Earth's natural cycle. This was their critical blind spot. They were prepared for a determined detective. They were utterly unprepared for a man whose instincts were sharpened by something otherworldly, whose aim seemed guided by a presence no one else could see, and whose faint, unnatural glow, visible only in the right moments, hinted at a power he barely understood and could not safely use. The syndicate's operatives, accustomed to shadows and silence, began to feel an unseen pressure. They spoke in hushed tones about strange occurrences around David, his uncanny timing, his ability to appear exactly where he was needed, his unnervingly precise shots that dropped targets with impossible accuracy. These weren't details that made it into Henninger's polished reports, but they were the kind of street-level anomalies Tavern paid attention to. He'd heard stories before, whispers of cops who seemed touched by something beyond the ordinary. He'd always dismissed them as barren myths. But now, with David at the center of these rumors, the line between myth and reality began to blur. The syndicate's strategy was simple. Isolate David. Make him a problem Chief Schaffer would be forced to address. They understood the politics of the precinct, the pressure Mayor Adam exerted to maintain the town's pristine image. They knew Schaffer, still burdened by Crystal's murder and other unspoken regrets, was vulnerable to influence. Their plan was to escalate operations, create chaos, and draw David into a confrontation they believed they could control. The harbor would be their stage, their illicit shipments the bait. They thought they were dealing with a man driven by mortal revenge. They had no concept of the deeper battle already raging inside him, a battle for Crystal's soul, fought on two fronts, against the syndicate and against the Earth's unseen forces trying to reclaim what had slipped from the cycle.